welcome everyone to Project Green course, our second class, session 1B. I'm just going to give a very quick roadmap of how the session will run today so that we all have a sense. And then we'll hear from our amazing speaker. I'll introduce him. And just a reminder, if you're just joining us, to add your place, the place that you're in, your town, your city, your village, and your country. Today we'll hear from Dr. Jagannadha Pawan Tamvada. He will be our speaker for the day. Actually, unfortunately, Erin Schrody, who we had intended to join us for today, won't be able to make it. So we'll be using that time to be in our small group, in our small pods, and for group discussions. And thankfully, Erin will be joining us later on in the course at a different date. So we can still look forward to that. So the session today, we'll hear from Dr. JP. And then we will have a Q&A. So as you're hearing JP talk about his incredible experience, I'd love for you all to just be jotting down any questions you might have. And then once he's done, we can send those into the chat. And I'd love for everyone to just really focus on one great question that, that's really important to you. I'm not sure that we'll get to all of them, but we'll try our best. So we'll have time for Q&A with Dr. JP, and then we will go into our small breakouts, and the TAs will give you a little bit more information about how those will run, but you'll have time to ask any questions you might have about the syllabus. And then we'll do a little bit of writing and thinking through this theme of this week, which is activating your voice. We're thinking this week about leadership, personal storytelling. We've heard several stories this week, and so we'll have a little bit of time to focus on that in our breakout groups, and we'll have time to really listen to each other carefully and have some conversations there. And then we'll come back to the larger group and have everyone share from those smaller breakout rooms, so the larger group can get a sense of what everyone's been talking about. But without further ado, I would love to introduce our speaker for the day. It's actually a great pleasure for me to introduce Dr. Jagannadha Pawan Tamvada, or Dr. JP for short, who is going to talk to us about his journey as an academic on a mission to democratize capitalism and create prosperity for all using technology and innovation. He's actually an award-winning business economist who specializes in interdisciplinary entrepreneurship and strategic research. His research on how going green dramatically benefits businesses offers incredible insights into the positive externalities of conducting business in ways that actually benefit the planet. I had the pleasure of meeting with JP earlier this week in preparation for this session, and he has a really unique and inspiring worldview. So I'm really excited. Please join me in welcoming him, and just feel free to wave hello. And Dr. JP, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so very much, Natasha, for that very kind introduction. It's an absolute honor, a great pleasure to be in the midst of all these very energetic, enthusiastic, marvelous people that I see in front of me. This is probably one of the few meetings that I've attended over the last 1.5 to 2 years, wherein so many people have turned on their cameras. I usually talk to my screen. This time I feel like I'm talking to people. Love it. Thank you so very much, everyone. But that doesn't mean you have to keep your cameras on. Anytime you feel like turning them off, feel free to do so. It's a great pleasure to be here. And I, as Natasha said, I absolutely, was found from the woods by Judy Shields, who founded Turning Green, and she invited me, and I absolutely thank her for giving me this opportunity to interact with such brilliant people from across the world. She calls you all future leaders who are future saviors of environment on this planet. And it's absolutely my delight to be here. I have a small presentation that I want to share because I think that makes it more easier, as I speak. So I'm just sharing it with you, and I get started shortly. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Oh, excellent. So I have titled my talk as We and Our World. And of course, I'm working at University of Southampton in England, but I have a broad range of interests, and some of them I'm absolutely thrilled to be sharing them with you. This is a quick outline of what I'm going to do over the next 20-25 minutes. I'll start off with a small story, and then I'll discuss about rational choice, incentives, and the tragedy of economics, pose some fundamental questions, come back to the 5 elements of environment, and then just describe a very simple model that I think I've seen many champions of change use. That's a broad outline of my talk for this morning. This is a story that I'm going to tell you at the outset. You see this palace of some sorts. And the story is, of course, related to this palace and the king who runs this palace. This is just a hypothetical palace. Don't take it to be the building that I'm referring to. This is a hypothetical palace, and then there's a king, and the king has a prince, and is a kingdom. He's running the whole thing. But then the prince has a small problem. The prince is a bit forgetful of what he is, who he is, and so on and so forth. And the other people in the palace somehow know that fact. So you have ministers and so on and so forth who are working for the king, often calling on this prince and saying, "Look, oh, little prince, I'll give you this nice bar of chocolate. Why don't you open the treasury inside? Get me those few diamonds out and give them to me." The prince, he's quite a lad. He's a child. He does not remember them. He does not remember everything. He does not remember that he's even the prince. But all he knows that there's a keys there and he can open the door. He definitely has that much common sense. So when he gets lured by this bar of chocolate, he goes, opens the vaults, and then he takes the gold and the diamonds, and he comes and gives the minister. He gets a chocolate in return. He's very happy that he got his chocolate. But what he doesn't realize is that he's giving away most of that treasure, which is kept in those vaults of his palace that belonged to his father, that belonged to the kingdom. He doesn't quite realize all that. He's just going and giving these away every time somebody is luring him with some sort of an incentive or other. And why am I telling you this story? Because economics is rooted in a couple of things. One called the rational choice theory, which is that self-interest alone determines our choices. And then incentives can channel our time, energy, and effort. What we do, when we do, how we do things can actually be moderated by what kind of incentives are put in front of us. And the entire socioeconomic structure of the world is built on these two assumptions. This is what I call the tragedy of economics. Why so? Because those two principles essentially mean we have insufficient investments in sustainable transport. We have solar panels that are very expensive even today. We have a pharmaceutical industry that disproportionately benefits from pandemics. So you do bad, and then you can do good to yourself. What a world we are in. We have car companies that continue to rely on diesel and gasoline engines. We have rainforests that are cut day in and day out because some company somewhere is going to benefit out of it, while it's going to cause a great degree of harm to the ecology of the planet. We have drug companies manufacturing drugs that cater to certain sections of the world that are able to pay them the money that will ensure that these drug companies get the profits that they need. So the investments of time, money, and energy are not in places that can create the greatest amount of well-being for people, but in places that can give the greatest economic return for these players. That's the irony of the world we are in. So under the current incentive structures, doing harm to environment can result in short-term benefits for big corporations. By keeping people illiterate, you can win elections. This has happened in a number of places. I don't want to specifically quote certain regions, but we know examples of places where the politicians deliberately ensure that the people are illiterate, because if they're illiterate, they wouldn't be able to watch television or they wouldn't be able to read newspapers. And these were times when private media was not very popular in certain parts of the world. And the only way they could access information was through newspapers. So if you don't allow them to get educated, then they won't be able to know what corrupt things politicians are doing. So they'll continue to cast their votes for these corrupt people, and they can win elections. So we are facing these situations wherein the incentives that are in place for companies, for businesses, for policymakers to put in place institutions, principles, and values that can move the entire humanity forward are not actually there. If you see war and conflict, they can make a whole lot of industries thrive. So what does that mean? There are incentives in place for war and conflict to take place on the planet. So the current incentive structures are big time failing us, are big time failing humanity. And there's a compelling need to shift the focus from the rational economic being to human being. You, me, and everyone who is going through this journey of life on this planet is a human being. However, social science has looked at us as economic beings who are trying to maximize our own returns, our own self-interest on this earth. So economics identifies a psychology of economic beings fairly accurately. They're short-termist, they're profit-seeking, they could be destructive for everything else if it benefits themselves. But economics does not really talk about good human beings, people like Gandhi, Mother Teresa, or organizations like Turning Green. There's a lot more conscientiousness that's involved in such endeavors. And economics does not really underpin its principles on the back of these wonderful, wonderful organizations or people. Now here is Gandhi. I'm just telling a 1 minute story. He was facing a gigantic British Empire. It was very powerful. It had a lot of military might at that time. And this was back in 1900s, early 1900s. And here comes this man saying we'll be non-violent against an oppressor. So this is very counterintuitive in terms of what he did. It was irrational. So what I'm making in front of you is a case for irrationality. Economics would suggest that if somebody fires a bullet, you fire the bullet back. But Gandhi was here saying, look, we'll not fire that bullet back. We'll stand up and give our life. Now, what that did was that it pricked the moral conscience of Britain in the early 20th century. And it found Gandhi as a formidable force who could capture the hearts of the British mill workers when he came to England, of the laborers who were working in British factories, English factories, when he went to London and Liverpool. The transformation that Gandhi brought was one that was rooted in non-economic rationality. Now, there are certain fundamental questions if we ask. This is going back to that prince and that story that we began with. If we know the answers to these questions, then we would behave in a much more non-economically rational way. And these are these questions. Who am I? How am I connected with you? Am I connected with you? The 30 of you who are listening to me, am I connected with you? How are you related to one another? And how are we linked to all humanity? If we know answers to these questions, our approach will be different. Our attitudes will be different, and what we do will be different. And this is a story, not a story, but this is what I see as an intuitive explanation of those relationships that I've just raised. There are 5 elements called earth, water, air, fire, ether. And what's so special about them? These 5 elements make me, my physical body. These 5 elements make your physical body. These 5 elements make the physical presence of every entity that we see on the face of the earth. Just these 5: earth, water, air, fire, and ether. This is it. We are all coming from those 5. We are composed of those 5. We are made up of these 5 elements. And that brings a natural sense of bonding between ourselves. You and I are connected in brotherhood and sisterhood because we have originated from these 5 elements and will merge back in those 5 elements. We are one large family of these 5 elements, and we need paradigm shifting innovations that protect them, because that can dramatically impact life on this planet, both for the well-being, and it is essential for the well-being of both our generation and the next generations that will appear here. So I have a very simple model. I call it the ICC model for transformation. And this is something that I've noticed as an undercurrent between everyone who came here and who made a big difference. With that very solid understanding in place that we are connected to one another, that the humanity and the entire humanity is our family, that the ecology of the planet is our own home, we are way beyond our narrow physical entities. We are much broader in terms of what we are as human beings. This can encourage us, motivate us to begin to make a difference. And I'm in the company, I know that I'm in the company of people who are already making a difference. But I simply thought, I'll put in front of you a formula that I thought was being emulated by people who made a huge difference on this planet. The first is initiate, when they proactively initiate something and let others get inspired to join that initiative. And they don't leave it at that stage of initiation, but they go and create something. That initiative leads to something which is creating something new, something that's original. And the processes of initiate and create do not serve their own interests, but through them, they're making a contribution to the world, a positive contribution to the world. And through these processes of initiating, creating and contributing, they become legends. So as a concluding line, because Natasha gave me only 20 minutes to speak, and here I conclude on time, I believe. Never hesitate to be an irrational economic being and a totally rational human being. The irrational economic being, when you look at the prince, he was very rational. He just grabbed that little chocolate and he gave away. This is what the entire economy is doing. For petty gains, for small returns here and there, they're acting in such a way that it leads to short-term benefits, but causes long-term harm. But a rational human being is someone who does the opposite. He forsakes the short-term benefit to keep the larger interests in view. Thank you. Speak to you soon.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. JP. That was fantastic. I know that we've all learned a lot from you, so thank you very much. I'm going
My
to,
pleasure.
yeah, that was really wonderful. I'd love to hear some questions from the students for you. So I'd love the way we're going to moderate this conversation, these questions, is I will have the student send the question in via the chat, and then I'll call on the student to ask their question directly to you. So I'm going to give everyone a few minutes to start thinking through your questions, but oh, I already see some coming in. Awesome. Daniel, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for your presentation. It was amazing. I want to ask you, why do you choose technology and innovation to carry out your mission? Is there a particular reason for this?
Thank you so much, Daniel. What a fascinating question. My belief about technology is that it is serving the interests of very few people. It is serving all of us, no doubt, but the disproportionate returns that occur from technology and innovation are occurring to only few people. They are the end beneficiaries. So the data that you give to Google, the data that I give to Google or Apple, they're all benefiting few shareholders somewhere. Now that could be a very narrow way of looking at it, but it is not a narrow way of looking at it. What I sincerely believe is that we need to leverage technology, we need to leverage innovation to ensure that it's working for the vast majority of people on this planet. There are wonderful things that technology and innovation come up with. Human mind is a marvelous entity. Can you imagine we are flying like birds in the sky? It's incredible, isn't it? This is what human mind is capable of doing. It's just taking you and putting in a flight and taking you, go in the air. We are phenomenally capable of accomplishing things that can't be even dreamt. Somebody going straight in a rocket, straight up. But the point is, what's the purpose of all this technology and innovation if it can only cater to a very small fraction of people or their interests? On the one hand, it has the capability to be more democratic. Technology, whether you are in Ghana or in India or in Japan, you could use technology to connect with one another. You could do commerce across borders. There are so many beautiful things about technology, but it has to be democratized. So on the one hand is its capability, on the other hand is its own limitations in terms of whom it serves ultimately. So the reason why I chose technology and innovation is because I fundamentally believe that it should serve the interests of all. It should not become something which is in the hands of only few people going forwards. How many of us understand the most advances in blockchain technology, artificial intelligence? Probably some of us do, imagine 5 years down the line, the number of people who will know all these technologies will be so minuscule. They will command the labor markets. They'll command how industries evolve. Now, this is something that is scary. That information, that knowledge about technology should be much more democratized. It should be known to all of us. When I say all of us, if not all of us, at least the majority should be able to access it, able to use it, understand what it is. And that's why I believe that it can be a great vehicle for transformation because of disproportionate impact it can have on ground.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have so many exciting questions here. Nupu, I'd love to hear from you.
Yes, hello. I would like to know how would you go about, or do you go about inspiring green paradigm shifting, like you call it, innovation?
Oh, excellent. So when you see the first person who saw a couple of his friends thousands of years ago pulling a log of wood with some ropes, and then he said, how can I make it more easy for them? And then he said, if at all I have a wheel, maybe the logs of wood can be put on a cart and they can be shifted much more easily. It'll save the effort of these friends of mine who are just struggling to pull those logs of wood, with the ropes. So when I say paradigm shifting innovations, they're not something, out of the world. They're sometimes very obviously there. It's all about saying and thinking, how exactly can we make sure that greening happens much more efficiently, in a much more effective way across the planet? And sometimes these insights can come when we are observing what is happening around us. Just like how that man who saw those logs of wood being pulled by his friends and said, look, no, there needs to be a different way of doing it. Now, in the current world that we are in, we are just assuming that it's okay for companies to continue to use coal. We have leaders who are saying there's no climate change. There are all kinds of things happening around us. So one of the very important things for us to do is to cognize that there are these issues and then start thinking about how they can be resolved. And the moment we give our mind space to it, we will find some solutions that are innovative, that can be paradigm shifting.
Fantastic. Thank you. Rohini, I'd love to hear your question as well.
Yeah, so my question was, so you talked about how the whole idea of a rational being, it's kind of obsolete now. So my question was, a lot of the economic theories that we use nowadays, basic stuff like, say, law of demand or supply, stuff that is taken as the gospel even now. Do you feel in all of these, there would need to be a paradigm shift because of the change in the rational man thinking?
The beauty of economics is that it can really very easily explain the economic aspects of our being. The human being is much bigger than an economic being. So there is one dimension of it which economics captures fairly accurately. There's no doubt in that. So am I saying we should dismantle economics completely? I'm not suggesting that. It's helpful, because we can predict, how the average person would behave in certain situations. But the moment we appreciate that as human beings, we are much more than our economic selves. That's when, when I see Judy here. Thank you, Judy, for joining in. I didn't see you when I was starting off, but when I see Judy, for example, I mean, she's, if she was only purely focusing on her economic aspects, and then she'd say, look, why would I even start turning green? Why would I bother getting these fantastic 30 people from around the world after a huge process of selection, reading through their applications and all that? What is Judy getting out of it economically? She really cares for the world. She's thinking in her heart, what is it that I can do? Now, going back to your own question, your question, now economic theories cannot explain Judy's behavior. This is a rational human being. She's not just being a rational economic being. Now, so in that sense, if we were to ask economics to come and start explaining Judy's behavior, it would take a gigantic leap. It would mean there's a huge paradigm shift. And of course, there are new theories in behavioral science and so on and so forth that try to do it because they've acknowledged the limitations of economics. But the vast majority of economic theory, the vast majority of structures that we have on the planet are all rooted in the economic being of the economic aspect of the human being. Which is why, for example, if you look, let's take anything, where you see a power structure, where you see what's happening, whether it is corruption on the planet, whether it is somebody who is just, the cost of solar panels, something that I referred to sometime earlier on. Why are they so prohibitively expensive? If they're good for our homes, if they're good for the country, if you're paying less bills, why are they prohibitively expensive? Why have we not sufficiently innovated on that front? If we are able to send a rocket straight up into the space, 100 kilometers into space, wow, we are smart people. But why are we not getting the price of the solar panels down? Very simple question. That's because the incentives are not in place. It is all, the incentives are towards corruption. The more you corrupt the system, the more benefit you get out of it. That's a tragedy of what economics is facing. That's how all the structures are. And that's why economics itself needs not just economics, but the way these structures, social and economic structures are organized around the planet, they need to significantly evolve. Otherwise, we'll just be rooted on that one economic aspect of our lives.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have a question from Sanjana. Sanjana, I'd love to hear from you.
Hi, sure. Yeah, I think my question was, when you're working with companies, how do we ensure that like the commitments are actually like real and tangible and not just like something that they do for a greenwashing type of thing? So like, how do we ensure, or how do we make sure that companies work in that way? Yeah.
No, thank you so much, Sanjana. I mean, great question. You know how to put me in a spot because, we cannot act like spies on these companies. It's very hard. There are power structures, there are powerful entities with very powerful lobbies and people behind, who are all indulging in great luxury thanks to those, the continuation of whatever they're doing. So it's not easy for us to spy, but there is a great scope. We have something called our voice. The moment we know there is something, there is whistleblowing, there are teams that we can form with other people. We can form partnerships with organizations like Turning Green, which would have a greater say. So it's not like that, we should never think we are alone in that journey. So the way to ensure that companies live up to what they are committing to rather than just greenwashing is by making sure that we are going together as a singular voice. We're taking the support of people who are like-minded, and we are not looking at, we're not coming across as somebody, because we are not in a position to spy on them all the time. But we definitely can come together to do something on that front.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually missed a question from Grace, which I think is definitely very relevant to the discussion we're having with you. So Grace, may we hear your question, please?
Sure. My question is, what drives people to being rational economic beings over human beings, and how can we shift that priority?
Thank you, Grace. I think that's a beautiful question. I'll take you back to my story of the prince. What was the one thing that made him take the chocolate? What was the one thing that made him take the chocolate and give away all the jewels from the treasury inside his palace? That was his forgetfulness. He didn't remember he was a prince. If he remembered he was the prince, he would never do it, because he'll say, look, I am the prince, I am the inheritor. These jewels will belong to me going forward. he just forgot about it. He just thought he was just another kid running around who had access to the treasury. He just thought he had the key, and in return for the chocolate, he could just go and give whatever these people asked of him. So the reason why I'm saying this is the reason why people act like rational economic beings, like rather than rational human beings, is because they forgot. We have forgotten that we are all connected to one another in one large family. If we remember that, our self-interest would not precede our actions. We'd always be thinking twice before doing anything. Within your own home, would you go and do something that would cause harm to your sibling? You wouldn't, because you understand that that is your family. Because you remember, this is my family, you're not harming it. You're thinking not of competing with someone, you're thinking about what to contribute in that situation. Exactly the same thing. If at all we strongly understand and believe that we are from these 5 elements, our physical existence is coming from that. And that's just not for our, for us human beings, but more broadly in the animal kingdom, in the plant kingdom, everything is made up of the 5 elements. And the moment we appreciate that fact, we are much more sympathetic. We put our economic being aside, and then we start acting as a rational human being. Just like how we act in our homes, with a lot of sympathy, with a lot of love, with a lot of care. And the reason is we are not forgetful at that point of our relationship with one another. The moment I remember my relationship with you all, I'm much more loving to you all, because I see you as my kith and kin, not as some strangers in some other parts of the world.
Thank you so much for that beautiful answer. Dalton, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, of course. So my question was, how are you able to get your message across to people who might be apprehensive to some of the new changing ideas and technologies that we're seeing today?
Wow, excellent. I think it's very hard to win people's hearts. But the moment they know that you are making a genuine, sincere effort, they are with you. Because there's something beautiful about us human beings. We read through the intent of people. We can look at someone and sort of understand what is going on in that person. So the moment we have a genuine intent, if not today, tomorrow, we will win over people to be on our side. If we are true to ourselves, there's no need to be true to anything else, because being true to ourselves is being true to the entire world. So people really see through us. We cannot pretend, we cannot wear masks. I cannot come and talk about all this if I don't sincerely believe in it. You would not believe me if I did not believe in what I'm saying myself. The reason why you would be believing what I'm saying is because I believe in it myself. So if we want people to be on our side, we have to be people of great conviction. We have to be people who believe in what we are saying. If they genuinely see us as trying to bring that technology for their advancement, and they understand our true intent, we will have them on our side. And if they are not on our side, tomorrow they'll come on our side. But the moment we ourselves are not very clean from inside, we'll always have barriers. If my social motives are only driven by my economic motives, I want to do good to the world because I want to be a trillionaire. I want to be a billionaire. That's the only reason why I'm trying to do good to the world. The world will make out very quickly. I want to do good to the world. Whatever happens in return is a consequence of it. But from the depth of my heart, I believe I'm here as that family member who is serving my family world over. We will have people on our side. They will be willing to listen to our voice. If we say, look, take this technology, it's new, it's not something that is understood by everyone, but if they have faith in you, they will have faith in that technology. Otherwise, they wouldn't. They'll think of that technology as a tool for exploitation that has come their way. So we can, by being genuine and true to ourselves, have a huge impact. That's what I believe.
Thank you so much. I think we have just time for one more question. So I'm going to go to a question that's a little bit different from the ones that we've had. Cecilia had a great question about the ICC model, which I'd love to get to, since that was such a powerful tool that you shared.
Yeah, hi. I hope you can hear me because my internet connection is a bit unstable. But anyway, my question was, so I found the ICC model extremely feasible and fascinating. And I wanted to ask, like, would you say that looking back at your own journey so far, the ICC model is the same model that you followed to kind of get where you are right now?
Absolutely. Thank you, Cecilia. You know, as I read more and more biographies of people who really made a difference, and I thought I should, you know, the limited time that we all have on this planet, and that is a fact of the matter, maximum 100 years is the duration given to us. I thought, how can I make a difference? And then when I started reading the biographies of all these people, I saw they all had a common pattern. They all had a common pattern. It all started with someone taking an initiative somewhere. If you don't take an initiative, forget about the next things. Initiatives. So somebody who is just sitting on the couch watching TV, we can't expect anything other than him or her watching TV, because he is not taking an initiative to do something. So it all starts with taking the initiative. I mean, these were, after understanding what I've seen, what I've read, I came across, I mean, I built this model up so that, you know, we should be able to democratize more and more people coming and becoming champions on this planet. And if only they knew that it's very simple. If they initiated something, and by initiating, they created something, and by creating, they're not only ensuring their own self-interest is advanced, but they're advancing the interests of the common good, they are legendary. This is what is a pattern that I've seen everywhere. And the moment I kind of knew the formula, I started doing it left and right. So I'm now trustee of 3 trusts in England. You know, if for example, anyone comes to me and says, look, you know, can we start something up? And that would have a positive externality in longer run. I'll say, look, I'm there with you, and let's do it. You know, because I believe initiative that leads to something that is created tangibly, intangibly, whatever, that culminates in a positive contribution to society is the formula. Let's use it. Let's use it left and right. So I would have probably done one institution before. Now I'm on a spree to go and initiate one after another several projects, because I sincerely believe that that is what can ultimately result. It can culminate in contributions from our side. But thank you so much, Cecilia.
JP, I just want to say once again, your wisdom and your spirit just are mind-boggling and incredible, and a gift. And I actually want to just quickly recount, since we're talking about initiative, why JP is here today. I was in a little shop in San Francisco, a little garden shop. And in that little shop, they used the New York Times, the Sunday New York Times, as their ranking for anything that people were purchasing. I happened to look down at the open business section of the New York Times. I saw a story on conscious capitalism. And it was very intriguing to me because it's something that I'm drawn to every time I see the word conscious. And as I was reading it, the shopkeeper came over and she said, why don't you take that? It seems like you need to read the whole story. And I said, okay. And I took it and put it in my bag and went home. And I opened up the paper and I started reading. And then I started Googling the person the story was about and just kind of seeing where that would take me. And something about JP on one of the pages just popped out at me. And I thought, I'm going to just go check out what he has to say. And I went to his website and was blown away by the quotes on the front of his site. And they were so resonant. And I never really thought of economics as a lever being used the way he's talking about it. And I was so intrigued that I wrote to him. And I never expected to hear back from him. And the next day I looked in my email and there was a letter from JP. And I kind of knew at that moment that there was a reason why we were interconnected. And now I'm seeing that reason resonate, because I'm watching all the questions that you had for this incredible man that showed up for us and brought his wisdom, and hopefully together we're going to keep changing the world. So I just want to say so much gratitude, and I'm so happy you were here, and I'm so happy that we all felt what we felt together at this moment in time, and I just huge honor.
Thank you so very much, Judy, for finding me in the woods. I still can't believe how you found me. You've been extremely kind in inviting me to speak to this wonderful group of people who've all kept their cameras on, more or less, till the very end. It's an absolute honor, and I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity to come and share my heart with all of you. Thank you so very much once again. Have a lovely day, and I hope to stay in touch. Thank you. Take good care. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, Natasha. Thank you so much for being a fabulous host. Thank you.
Wonderful. Wow. What a beautiful discussion. Thank you all for your really great questions. And I'm just grateful that we got to have time with this amazing speaker. So we are going to transition into our pods, which, as you know, we're staying in these same groups for the first 2 weeks, and then we'll switch out so that we can all get to know each other. So you'll be with the same TAs you were with last time, and you'll have time to actually ask any questions you might have about the syllabus at the beginning, and then the TAs will share more with you. But yeah, I hope you all have really rich and beautiful discussions. And Cassie, we can start sending folks into those breakout rooms now. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's great to see you all. Hello. Awesome. So I would love if we could take some really quick shares, 1-minute shares from each group. So shall we just start with pod 1? Was there somebody from pod 1 who's ready to share?
Maybe, could you mention who's in pod 1? Because I'm not sure, like, for example, which pod I was in. Sorry about that.
Actually, Cecilia, it's your pod.
Yeah,
so,
okay,
so,
then I can get
so from Ella's pod, yep. I'll give
Okay.
the name of the pod.
Yeah, then I think we all share a bit of our stories. And I think the thing that kind of culminated them all was that we thought our, personal experiences and what we saw happening around us, and the way we kind of relate to people, that's what kind of urged us to, I don't know, to move forward and to get involved in environmental and social justice. And I think each of us is kind of a different, reason that moves us forward, but at the same time, they're all interlinked together. And I found that extremely, fascinating. And I think some people were talking about, growing up in a rural area and seeing how some people struggle to feed the family and their community and their loved ones. And others were talking about, not repeating the same mistakes as the previous generations. So that's why they entered that, I don't know, the field. And I mentioned, for example, that it was a sense of frustration and anger, and increasing anger, that kind of got me involved and urged me to do something to change the situation. And yeah, I think it was pretty much it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cecilia. It's great to hear about those connections that you guys were forming. I think it goes back to what Dr. JP shared with us at the beginning of his talk. So I'd love to move on to pod 2, which was led by Gabby. So could someone from Gabby's group share with us your 1-minute takeaway?
Yeah, I can go. Yeah, so we shared our stories on how we came into the field. We got interested in the field of climate, and while we were after we shared that, we realized or a lot of our stemmed from our childhood. So from a very formative age, we'd had experience with nature, and because of that, the love for nature was has brought us till here. And the second thing that Gabby pointed out was that a lot of all of us had the opportunity to study these kind of subjects in high school or in college. So that is also a common factor. And then we spoke about our motivation, which touched upon family, community, uh, just general the just general sense to see the world transformed. So yeah, this is our summary of what we talked about.
Wonderful, thank you. And shall we hear from Grace's pod?
Me? Okay. Thank you very much. From pod 3 from Grace. I think we are 4, excluding Grace. Okay, plus Grace, that's 5. So Juliana talked about that she learned as a child about acid rain and how trees, organisms are being hurt, and that really hit her so bad. Then Rishi cares a lot about the polar bears, and he has a project about polar bears and being considered an endangered species because of pollution. He also learned that pollution has tremendous effects on uninhabited polar regions, and how these tropical regions affect species in polar regions. Then he also talked about why should these animals die, and they are basically because of anthropogenic activities. And Philip, he talked about how much we are unaware the impacts of anthropogenic activities and the relation to climate change. Then Riwa talked about how much she's very interested in the ecosystem and the organisms and how that can help to maintain stability of environment. It's basically the ecosystem she's very much interested. Then, of course, me, I just gave a short story of how I was moved to, compulsorily study a course that I had an interest in, but at the end of the day, I found out that was not my passion. I wanted to, they made me to study medicine, though I started out with microbiology, but at the long run, because of my great desire for the environment, I had to switch over to hydrobiology. That was basically the stories from pod 3.
Thanks so much, Amarachi. It's wonderful to hear what you all discussed in your pod. Thank you. shall we hear from Warren's pod? And I know we're at time, so let's just have 1 minute shares, one from Warren's pod and then from Leah's pod. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll go pretty quickly. In my group, we talked a lot about the regional differences. It was really interesting to hear about the different areas that we were all from. A few of us were from northern areas with snow, and some of us were from areas with no snow. And it was just like really interesting hearing those regional differences. We talked a lot about recycling and the different infrastructures for recycling that were in place in our different countries. And I found that really interesting too. And we kind of had a good discussion about how different countries have different infrastructures in place to help deal with those sorts of things. But the big overall message that kind of like drove it home for me is that even though we all had those regional differences and different infrastructures in place, we're all still dealing with these same issues with climate change and global warming and all of these issues with species extinction and pollution levels and all that stuff. It's a more global issue. And I kind of connected that a little bit. I mentioned that in college, I got really passionate about some of my regional things, but realized it's a lot more than just my region. It's a global issue, not just a regional issue.
Thank you, Natasha. Our pod was pod 5, which was Elia's group, where she was the leader. And just to summarize, questions that we're just sharing about how. So she asked how, in case we had a story to tell about climate change, how it started into activism, how did it start, and how do we tell it? Very quite interesting story that we all heard from each other. And interesting of us all that we captured, I managed to capture, was the power in actually coming up as a team and doing something that sometimes you feel there is a problem that's out there, but when you're doing it alone, sometimes when you actually are like a team, you may find that the problem is actually not as big as you anticipated it. So it is the power of the team that usually beats all odds and also gives the courage. One key important aspect I think I got from that, from the conversation that we had, although the conversation was lengthy and we were cut short by time, but we went on and went further and was starting to make conversations around the whole plastic pollution, global mass problem that we actually facing. And yeah, it was so much interesting, only time that cut us off. But thank you, that was just a brief story from our pod. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for that, Sinan. It's great to hear from your group as well. So thank you everybody for joining us today. It's been a fantastic session. I know that it always feels like we don't have quite enough time. And I've actually sent out a course culture survey with just 2 questions on it, 2 very quick questions, so that we can actually talk about the community and how we feel about, you know, if class goes 5 minutes over, you know, is that okay for you? Are you able to stay on? And the second question was around whether we create a WhatsApp group or continue with group conversations outside of the course on Google Chat. So I'd love to know your preferences and your responses to those. I just sent that survey out. And until next week, we're focusing on environmental storytelling. So we'll actually learn from some really wonderful speakers. And we don't have class this Monday since it is a public holiday in the US, but we'll see you again next Saturday. And as always, please feel free to be in touch throughout the week. So see you all. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, 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 bye.
Bye.
Fun.
Bye.